Mom and Dad, are you ready?
Today's word is stupendous.
You need some encouragement.
Stupendous marriage encouragement.
You need some inspiration.
It's like, Wonder Twins power activate. Form of a squirrel. Why was one of them always like a rodent? The other one was an ice. I never understood that. Sorry, that's a random superhero reference.
You're listening to the Stupendous Marriage Show
with our friends Stu and Lisa Gray.
Oh, that's that word. Stupendous.
The Stupendous Marriage Show.
Hey there, welcome to Stupendous Marriage Show. I'm Stu Gray.
Hey, I'm Lisa Gray.
This is a show where we answer your questions about marriage, whatever they might be. You send them to us on air at stupendousmarriage.com. And wow, we're glad you're here.
Yay! It has been a crazy, crazy week, about a week and a half now. We had some pretty spectacular stuff happen in the past week. You want to tell it? You want me to tell it?
You were telling them.
Okay,
Good
just
job.
making sure.
Keep going.
Thanks.
Fabulous.
So last week, we were contacted by the New York Post.
Okay, wait. Before that, let's talk about what happened right before we were contacted by the New York Post. Do you want to go through that?
So I thought you wanted me to tell the story.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump right in. Go ahead.
No, you tell the pre-story now.
Okay, we were yelling at each other, and we were like, why? Why are we ever going to record a show? And there was yelling and slamming of doors and all sorts of things. Maybe it wasn't that bad, but that's what it felt like. And, I took a shower. I'm like, and then about an hour later, go on with your story.
So an hour later, after this dramatic thing happened that I don't recall at all, but anyways.
Whatever.
Not in that way. Mm-hmm. But anyways, you got an email and you were like, is this legit? This is weird. And the New York Post lady had emailed you. I think you told me that you thought it was originally spam. Like you just didn't even believe it. Because you get those kind of emails all the time where
you don't necessarily know if it's true or not. My Indian cousins, brothers, nephews, whatever needs $1 million.
Right.
I mean, that was kind of on that level with me. That's kind of where I thought that was what it was.
Right. And so then you checked to see her name and she actually was legit. So you came to me and you're like, hey, I just got this email from this person at the New York Post. I thought it was weird and not legit. And then I looked into it and it looks like it's legit. And I'm like, oh my gosh, find out what she's wanting. And so she emailed you back.
And said we're going to be part of an article that she's writing about relationships and marriage podcasters. And what? It was just crazy. I mean, it happened very quickly. I mean, Monday, Tuesday, and she asked for pictures and all sorts of stuff. And it was really kind of cool. And we're like, what is this going to be? Well, it's going to be a roundup of marriage and relationship podcasters. And it happened so fast, On Wednesday night, New York Post published online the article that she had written. And then Thursday it came out in their newspaper proper. And it was really neat. I mean, the way she presented the couples in her article, people who've had troubles in their marriage, and then they've turned to podcasting to encourage and help other people. And we knew one of the other couples, Tony and Elisa, over at One Extraordinary Marriage, rock. I don't know the other two couples, but it was just exciting, crazy, and humbling. It's like, what? Really?
Well, and on Monday, so yes, we had the little discussion. I say discussion. I don't say argument. Discussion.
You say tomato. I say tomato.
Yeah, discussion earlier in the morning. We find this out. Then I started feeling bad and I got really sick Monday night, like fever and throwing up and all that icky stuff. And she emails us back. So you had sent her, we have some professional pictures that we had done recently and you'd sent her those. And then she was like, hey, I would love to get a picture of you guys in the studio. And I'm like, what? Like, I look horrible. I feel horrible. There's no way a camera's getting anywhere near me. I said to you, well, find out when. When does she need it by? Because at this point, we did not know when it was going to be published.
Sure.
And she said, I just need it on Tuesday by 12, which is Eastern time, and we're on Central time. And I'm like, okay. And I just said, all right, just let me sleep tonight. I will feel well enough tomorrow. So sure enough, on Tuesday morning, I did not feel 100% better at all, but my fever had broke and I wasn't throwing up anymore. And so I got my face on, I got my makeup on and did my hair a little bit, and we set up the shot and we sent her the shot. And now I looked at it on my computer because I do photography. And so I looked at it on my computer, but I did not look close enough because after we sent it to her and then she ended up using that picture, I noticed like the desk was dirty and all these wires were hanging around, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But now I will always remember that picture as the one where, like, I'm sick as a dog.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we don't have the perfect studio. That is true. This is a makeshift studio room in a spare bedroom. And, we do with what we got, right?
Yeah.
We got to do with what we got.
It was cool. I had several people say to me, but it's real.
Yeah, it is.
We're not in a professional studio. I actually like the studio, but it is a room in our house, and we have just really dedicated this to your voiceover business and then now the marriage podcast. And so it's being real, which kind of fits with who we are as a show. So
the God piece in it is just funny, like how we were just at each other's throat, and then something happens that's totally left field, something that we hadn't even thought about, something that was never even on our radar or consideration or anything like that. And I saw a friend of mine, Bill Todd, in the store literally walking around, and I said hello to him the other day, and he said, "Oh, congratulations on the New York Post." And I was like, yeah, it's just crazy because we just started the podcast back not too long ago after a big pause, right? And I said to him, yeah, we started again back in July after about 2.5 years. And of course I was, I stopped because we were burned out and angry. And it's like, man, just not going anywhere. And then he's like, oh, yeah, and then this happens out of the blue. Isn't that funny how God works? And it's like, you know, when you're trying, it doesn't happen. But when you're not trying, God shows up. It's like, maybe that's how it's supposed to work. I don't know.
Yeah, and we'll put a link to the article from the New York Post in our show notes. And again, we just want to do a shout out to them and say thank you so much. It was very humbling and very appreciative that we were included in the article.
So again, if it's your first time here at the Stupendous Marriage Show, we are glad you're listening. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. You can send us your emails. If you've got a question about your relationship, on air at stupendousmarriage.com is the direct email. You can go to our website at stupendousmarriage.com and look for the blue button that says send Stu and Lisa an email, and you can do it that way through our website too. Here is the email for today. Here's something I've never heard talked about from a Christian pro-marriage perspective. The old saying is, behind every great man is a great woman, or some variation of that. The feminist movement and modern culture would have us believe this is no longer true. What's your perspective on this? Can a great supportive woman make a great successful man? What are the attributes of that great woman? Thanks for your thoughts. Really enjoy your show. That's an interesting email and an interesting question. In our culture, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So you're a strong woman.
Yes.
Boy, where do you go with that? Would you consider yourself a feminist? I don't know if we've ever had that conversation. Do you consider yourself feminist leaning? I mean, you're a woman. Obviously, you have feminist tendency
I
because
am
you're
a woman,
feminine lady. But do you consider yourself like raw woman?
Well, I am a raw woman. I don't know if I do it that well. I don't know. I think that women can be independent. They can be strong. They don't necessarily, quote unquote, need a man. That's the thing, I think, way back when everybody thought that women couldn't do anything unless they were married. Mm-hmm. The prototype was you would graduate high school, you didn't go to college, you found your husband, you got married, you had kids, you stayed at home, raised the kids. The husband always worked, provided for you. You know, that was the lifestyle for many years. And so as women came up and had to go in the workplace oftentimes when the wars happened and then when people financially, needed the second income, I think a lot of people then said that they were no longer needed the man. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, in the Bible, there were lots of women who were independent women who ran businesses, who did things. And Jesus talked to those women and he interacted with those women. And so I'm one of those women. Like I'm one of those women who I'm very thankful to have a husband. I'm very thankful to be married. But at the end of the day, like, I'm complete in Jesus. Like, I don't need you to complete me, like that goofy line in that movie says. You don't complete me. I see it as you enhance me. You are kind of like the icing on the cake. And I'm very fortunate that I have a husband who I can support. But I feel like you support me as much as I support you. And so that question of, does a good woman make a good man? Yes, but I think a good man can make a good woman.
I think it's a dance that we do. I think it takes two people to make a great marriage. I don't think it's one pushing the other out there either way, male to female or female to male. I was just thinking about my unique perspective on this. I graduated from a women's college.
Right.
Okay. And that's a weird thing to say, but I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Theater from Stevens College, which is a women's college. They take 20, 30 guys every couple years to fill out their theater department. I went on a full ride scholarship, but I have literally a degree from a women's college. And so in our theater classes, it was pretty normal. I mean, we're all hanging out, we're all doing theater, we're all being creative, blah, 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 creating shows, doing scenes and memorizing things and blah, blah. So it was all like family, okay? But in our general education classes, there were 2 or 3 guys maybe in the math class and 2 or 3 guys maybe in Spanish and 2 or 3 guys in history and science. So the dynamic in those rooms were really interesting. We had some teachers who really hated us, resented the fact that we were on campus at all, and it would ignore us. And then there were a couple, there was one specifically that our math teacher taught the whole class to us and ignored the 30 ladies who were in the class with us.
Oh, that's funny.
It was really weird.
Yeah.
And so the dynamic there was unique and interesting. Not that I can speak to that because I went to school at a very, I would call up-and-coming women's college, you know what I mean? So the feminist thought process, I think, was really dynamic there. But at the time, I wasn't walking with God. I wasn't thinking about any of that. And I think my thought patterns I've tried to get my thought patterns more aligned with what the Bible says. And that is, we're made unique and different as husband and wife, and then we come together and complement each other, and then God sees us as one, even though we're completely two different beings and we have our own thoughts and our own selves and our own makeup, and we're uniquely gifted and created to do things independently. When we come together, it's like, Wonder Twins power activate, form of a squirrel. Why was one of them always like a rodent? The other one was an ice something. I never understood that. Sorry, that's a random superhero reference. But it really is coming together, and the talents and gifts that we both can move us in a positive direction.
Yeah. In the Bible, it says that woman was created to be the man's helpmate, right? But it doesn't mean that meant the man was supposed to dominate over her. It didn't mean that he was then in charge of her like he was in charge of all the animals. You know what I mean? And so I think that helpmate relationship really goes both ways. And there's different seasons of life. And there's times that I know people where like the husband's in medical college and the wife is working full time and doing everything and handling the kids while the husband's going and getting the degree to be able to doctor. And then when he gets the degree and starts practicing, she's able to back off and do more things at the house. And I've seen those exact roles reversed where the wife is the doctor and the husband stays at home with the kids. And there's nothing wrong with that. It has to be what God's design is for your marriage. And as long as you're together and as long as you're backing each other up in whatever capacity that means, I think that's what makes a great man, a great woman, and a great marriage is when you have each other's back, no matter what your scenario is in life.
I've heard different teachings on that word, that phrase, ezer kenegdo or ezer kenegdo, which is the helpmate word, the helpmeet word. And you hear various things, but it doesn't necessarily mean his helper. I read something from a guy named Roy H. Williams saying it means opposite and facing. Azer was also a word for power, so an opposite power or an opposite facing power. So there's strength in the man and there's strength in the woman, someone who faces him and they can stand together and they can stand opposite each other. So it's like they're facing each other and they're strong and they can face away from each other and protect one another. So not necessarily someone supporting him, not helping him out, but an equal and opposite strength. You know what I mean? That they're both strong. And I saw this T-shirt the other day. I don't know who was wearing it. The phrase has been going around recently, the future is female. The future is female. And it just said the future is female and male.
Awesome.
And I'm like, that's kind of cool. I appreciated that. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and this past Saturday, you sent out your weekly emails where you share some links to some interesting articles. And there were several in that email this past Saturday that really connected with me. But one in particular was on Marriage Today. And the guy was talking about the fact that is the man really the head of the household? And that was so interesting to me. Really interesting to me. And so I read it, and one of the lines in it, and we could put a link in the show notes so you can read it as well, is that the man is not the head of the household. Christ should be the head of your household.
And there's so many questions about that. Well, my husband doesn't lead. How does he become a leader? And he's the head of the household. He doesn't act like the head of the household. So it was eye-opening to me too.
It was really good. And he talks about, so as a husband, because it's so confusing in our world with feminism, with women trying to be independent and everything, a lot of men just don't know what to do. So they're just passive and don't do anything.
Oh.
And so he said, if Christ is the head of your household, and you submit to him and follow his example, your responsibilities as a husband and being the quote unquote leader will come into clearer focus. And I just was like, and leader, he even says in here, is not somebody that goes and just bosses everybody around.
Right.
It's walking in your gifts. It's being everything you can be in your marriage for your family. And that looks differently for each person and each husband and each wife. And so I thought that was such a great article to really have this listener maybe go read and think about some more. As men, who are you? How do you lead your families? And then how do you allow your wife to help lead with you and to be everything she can be along with you and being supportive of you and everything you can be?
And I think the Bible talks to strong women. Proverbs 31 is all about women and what a godly woman looks like. And I've written about that on our website too. We'll link to that in our show notes. But my perspective was more from the husband side of things. What does a Proverbs 31 husband look like? Trusting his wife and loving his wife well and being a man worthy of a good woman and praising her more often. And
I got to read that.
I wrote it a couple years ago, so it may have slipped by over the years. But we really appreciate your email. Thank you so much for sending them. You can always send yours on air at stupendousmarriage.com. Look for the big blue button at our website. And if you're new here again, thanks so much for hanging out with us this week. We will talk to you next time.
See ya. Yeah.
Like the show? Like the show?
Yeehaw.
Share the podcast. Tell another couple.
Hold on. Hold up. Doom, 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 doom. Do,
hello.
Do,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, how? Movie says, you don't compete.
Where's I going with that?
Okay, let's start over. Yeah.
Like the show? Like the show? Share the podcast. Tell your married friends.
Yeah.